Chairman Hall, we're ready to begin when you are.
Thank you, Ashley. Good morning. This meeting of the board is a hybrid physical virtual meeting. I'd like to welcome those in the boardroom with me today. While keeping your microphone muted, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I'll ask the secretary to the board to address a few technical and protocol items.
We have a quorum. The full board is present for this meeting. Chairman Hall and Board Member Smith. Please ensure that you have silenced any mobile devices you have with you. The virtual portion of this hybrid meeting is on Cisco WebEx. We have two OIT staff, Ben Rana and Victor Amaya, monitoring and managing the meeting. They will be locking this meeting and no new connections will be allowed. OIT will be advancing the slides, so you will hear presenters say, "Next slide." If you lose connectivity in this meeting, please contact Victor Amaya. Lastly, this meeting is being recorded. The video recording of the open portion of this meeting will be posted for public viewing for a limited period of time. Chairman Hall, that concludes the technical and protocol items. We're ready to continue when you are.
The secretary will read an opening statement on the Government in the Sunshine Act.
This is an open Farm Credit Administration board meeting under the Government in the Sunshine Act. If anyone raises a subject that may be discussed in closed session as permitted by the Government in the Sunshine Act, Chairman Hall will entertain a motion to close the meeting.
We will now review the published meeting agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as published?
There is. I move to adopt the agenda as published.
I second the motion. Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the matter? If not, the secretary will record the vote on the motion.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Chairman Hall?
Aye. Motion carries. Next, we will consider whether any portions of the meeting should be closed to public.
The agenda does not include items that we should properly disclose in closed session. I move that the entire meeting remain open.
And I second the motion. Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, the secretary will record the vote on this motion.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Chairman Hall?
Aye. Motion carries. You will please turn to tab 1. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes as presented in tab 1.
I move to approve the minutes for the January 8th, 2026 regular board meeting as presented.
Second the motion. Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, the secretary will record the vote on the motion.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Chairman Hall?
Aye. Motion carries. Please turn to tab 2, and I will now ask Vonda Bell to present a human capital overview. This is an information item. Vonda?
Good morning, Chairman Hall, Board Member Smith. Thank you for the opportunity to present this human capital overview. Next slide, please. This morning, I will briefly talk about FCA's workforce. We'll mention some things about our headcount, the age of our workforce in comparison with the age of the federal workforce as a whole. We'll talk about retirement eligibility at FCA. We'll then move on to human capital engagement. We'll talk about the merit hiring plan, and we'll discuss some other major human capital reporting that's underway. And then I'll open it up for questions from the board. Next slide. This slide is a snapshot of the FCA headcount covering the past 10 years. A few things I'd like to point out with this slide. Of course, everyone can see the 2025 to 2026 drop, which is where you see the deferred resignation program, separations among some other retirements taking place. A few other things I'd like to point out about this slide, though, is in doing my analysis and my research, I found some good information, and some good information was shared with me about everything from how FCA staffed up for the during the farm crisis, and some of the information shared with me. Fun fact: shared that back in 1997, the Office of Examination alone had over 300 employees, and then by 1999. OE had gone down to 55, right? And so in thinking about the ramifications of the farm crises and how the agency had to quickly staff up, and then thinking about the subsequent mergers that took place over the years later, what this shows is that the agency has for a long time been practicing strategic workforce planning. So that was a really cool example to hear about, and I wanted to share that with you. Another thing I will say is during the 80s, when we brought in our cohorts, our classes of examiners, it was pretty cool to find out that we still have a couple of the various cohorts. We still have a few folks from the class of 87, from the class of 88, and the class of 89. And so that was pretty cool to find out. I don't know how long they'll be with us here at FCA, but they're still here with us. So that was pretty nice. And then another thing I wanted to mention on here, we had approximately 20 people who originally signed up for the deferred resignation program when it was offered last year. Ultimately, we had about 18 employees to take the deferred resignation program. But again, we've had other separations, retirements, and a handful of resignations as well. So it's not all DRP, but a big chunk of it is the DRP. And currently, we're actually around 301 in terms of our head count. This is a snapshot of our age distribution compared to the rest of the federal government. As you can see, FCA's workforce is younger than the rest of the federal government. I will highlight a few things here. We have the larger percentage of early career hires than the rest of the federal government. And that terminology, early career hires, you'll hear that a lot because that is a priority of this administration. How they're defining early career hires, it's the new hires with less than 5 years experience. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. For us, that could include our pathways, interns, recent graduates, those folks. And then you'll see under the age 40 to 44, a large chunk of the FCA workforce falls in that category. But we have a pretty good distribution here. And that is a good sign for the agency in terms of keeping that talent pipeline, our bench, ready. This slide is a snapshot of our retirement eligibility. So the things I want to mention here is that we're talking about voluntary retirement, not any of the special retirements like early retirement or anything like that. We're talking about just voluntary optional retirement where you're eligible and you can walk out the door today if you wanted to, but don't. And so in this slide, we see that our retirement eligibility is trending down. And that is the culmination of a couple of things, right? So we know as more retirement eligible people leave, that number is going to be impacted. But we're also bringing in the early career hires who are, of course, are not eligible for retirement. So that impacts that number. Another important thing is that for FCA employees, once they reach retirement eligibility, they typically stay on board at least 5 years beyond eligibility before they actually retire. Okay. One other thing I'll mention is that OE has, the Office of Examination has a retirement eligibility rate of 6.4% as of today. And then by 2030, that will go to 10.4%. And again, and that's a lot lower than we've had in years past. So we're moving in the right direction in terms of having a really good mix for our workforce. Human capital engagement. We recently did a short 3-question pulse survey, and I'm sorry, this slide is not very clear, but I can tell you the 3 things we asked about. We asked about the employees' job satisfaction with FCA as an organization. We asked about their satisfaction with their particular job, and we also asked how they felt about recommending FCA as a good place to work. The results of the pulse survey reflected a strong level of overall satisfaction with their jobs and FCA. It showed that we have a strong level of engagement and just confidence in the agency. And so just overall high employee satisfaction and engagement. And this is very important because we've implemented quite a few mandates that have come down, right? And so some of the things we're implementing or have implemented, it could be a combination of or looked upon as dialing flexibilities back. But how you handle those things, how you roll those things out, it matters. And so for me, I feel that it's reflected in these results. It's reflected that employees appreciate the way the agency has rolled these things out. The merit hiring plan. This is one of the administration's signature plans. And so the core tenets of the merit hiring plan, establishment of a strategic hiring committee. And this is a committee, the rules, the way it's laid out, it has to be led by the political appointees, majority political appointee in the agency. So for our committee, for instance, it's led by the chairman and Mr. Smith is the vice chair. And so we have one non-political person on the committee, and then we have subcommittees that are made up of career people, which OPM allows agencies to do. The annual staffing plan is a core tenet of the merit hiring plan. And what this means is agencies are having to plan out to quite the degree of specificity the hiring they're planning for the year. That does not mean things won't change, but what OPM and OMB are requiring is that agencies discuss those changes with them and let them know when those changes will take place. So it's a very collaborative process, and I'll touch on that. The annual staffing plan also comes with quarterly updates. It requires quarterly updates to OPM and OMB. Another tenet of the merit hiring plan is to prioritize mission critical hiring. So if you looked out on USA Jobs right now for the Farm Credit Administration, you'd see vacancies from the Office of Examination, the Office of Regulatory Policy, and possibly vacancies from the Office of Information Technology. And so this is all getting to the tenet of prioritizing mission critical hires. That does not mean agencies are not able to hire in other areas, but what that means is hiring might look different in those areas. It might be time limited, not on a permanent basis. The priority is on the mission critical hires. Prioritizing early career hires. I mentioned this. This is one thing the agency is really working with, OPM is really working with agencies on. And the OPM guidance specifically called out partnering with land-grant universities to do your hiring and recruiting. And I was glad to see that because we were really far ahead when it comes to that, right? We've always partnered with the land-grant universities and recruited there. And so again, those are the early career hires are 5 years or less. That's what OPM is categorizing this group as. And we have a really good story to tell there. And we continue to recruit. The Strategic Hiring Committee recently approved the recruitment of associate examiners at a few different grade levels. And so you may have seen those on USA Jobs. The use of skill-based assessments. And what this is about is OPM has said for agencies to move away from those self-assessments where folks just go on there and say, yes, I walk on water, I do all these things really great. And they are having agencies move more to behavioral-based performance-based interviews, structured interviews, where you actually give them a particular scenario related to the job, and they have to explain to you how they would handle that situation. So they're moving away from employees being able to just say, yes, I'm a novice or an expert in this area. They want the agencies to actually go a step further, do away with those self-assessments and implement skills-based assessments. Inclusion of the 4 optional questions for FCA in terms of the grade level, it's for VH34s and above. A few things about that. The inclusion of the 4 questions, the questions center around the Constitution, efficiency, recent executive orders, and work ethic. For the external announcements to those candidates who are outside of the federal government, it is required that we include those 4 questions in the vacancy announcements. The candidates are not required to answer them, but it is required that we include them. For government-wide or FCA internal announcements, it is not required that we include those questions. But again, agencies are encouraged to use these questions. And the guidance from OPM has asked agencies to look at these responses more so as a cover letter, right? And so it's not to be used to rate or rank an applicant. And the responses are actually only to be seen by the human capital staff who is actually working the vacancy announcement and agency leadership. So it's not even something that is to be shared broadly. One thing I did not have on the slide that I should mention, because I've heard from a lot of folks on it, is another core tenet is the 2-page resume. We hear a lot from people on that asking, how am I going to put my 30 years of experience on a 2-page resume? So a lot of chatter about that, but that's also one of the core tenets. And then finally, as it relates to the merit hiring plan, there is strong coordination between FCA, OPM, and OMB, particularly the management arm of OMB, on how agencies are implementing the merit hiring plan. Constant reporting on the merit hiring plan, tracking, offering to help agencies if they get stuck on any of the core tenets of the merit hiring plan. It is a major piece of the administration's plan. Other human capital reporting, we are working on the consolidated monthly report. This is a report that goes to OPM every month on the 10th of every month. It includes information on the merit hiring. It includes information on the return to office, how agencies are doing there. It includes information on head count. It monitors everything from how you're using probationary periods, right, to make sure you're using them effectively for what they are for. And then it also tracks things like performance ratings, awards, and a few other things. Quarterly staffing plan updates, I mentioned that. So that's the annual staffing plan we have to put together, but quarterly updates are required on that. And that's just so that agencies can have the opportunity to touch base with OPM and OMB to talk about how they're doing with implementing their annual staffing plan and whether any course corrections are needed, which is allowed, but they just want you to coordinate with them. Performance management, I mentioned that as part of the consolidated monthly, but I mention it again because periodically we get ad hoc reporting on performance management. Recently, OPM rolled out a performance management training for supervisors across the federal government. It was unexpected, but they rolled it out, and that's an example of them asking agencies to report back on the completion rates, asking agencies if they needed to request any extensions. So we get that kind of reporting that we have to do. And then finally, ad hoc reporting as requested. And I just gave an example of what could be considered an ad hoc reporting. But I will say, for calendar year 26, the reporting has died down a lot. Last year in 2025, it was just a tremendous amount of reporting. There's been some consolidation, and there's been some communications to say which reports are no longer needed. And so that's been nice. The reporting requirements have been going down. So the assumption is OPM continues to get what they need.
Yes, thank you, Vonda. Great presentation. Number one, I'm relieved to see we're looking at 2 pages of resumes. When I came to FCA, I think I had to go back 38 years to my college resume, and I had a hard time filling out 1 page, let alone 2 pages. So a good constructive move. It's nice to see. It's nice to see our practices have closely aligned up. Not a lot of difference there.
Yes.
You know, the emphasis on new hires right out of school, land grant colleges. Duffy and I looked at each other and smiled on that one. And I think, I know we've went back to our alma mater. I know there's a number other of the employees. That's where we can really tap into employees to go back and maybe talk the ag finance class, establish those relationships with the personnel offices to get in top quality people with FCA. And I really appreciate the history lessons. You know, the fact that FCA can expand on particularly our examination workforce if needed. It fits it exactly in with our mission of being there in good times and bad. And your salute to the 1987-89 class. I know they're getting thin, but it's nice for us that went through the 80s, at least from my standpoint from the borrowing end, to know that there's people that can identify closely with that. You told them when it comes to retirement, don't. I don't know how much effect that has, but I do appreciate their historical input. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. And when you said getting thin, you meant figurative, not literal.
Yeah, right.
Because I'm in that category.
Yes, yeah, me too.
Vonda, I want to, and this kind of follows up on what Board Member Smith was bringing up. I focus on that snapshot of age distribution. And if you look at those under 30, 1 out of 5 FCA employees are under 30. And I just think that's remarkable. I mean, I think that's encouraging because we're building a bench going forward, but that age group is still interested in working at a federal agency and working for a place like FCA. And a lot of that just goes to our recruiting efforts. I mean, and the work that Thais has done and the work that you continue to do and all of the people in OE with our staff development division, I think that to me is a highlight, and I really appreciate that. The last thing I'll just say is you mentioned the reporting and how it's died down, but I really think a lot of the reason, at least for this agency, it's maybe slowed down, is just how responsive we were providing information during this first year. And I think building that relationship, and a lot of credit goes to you and your staff, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Vonda, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Good job. If there are no further questions, I'll thank you for your presentation. And now we will move on to tab 3, and I'm going to ask Darius Hale and Jennifer Cohn to present the final rule 618.8440 business planning. This will be an action item. Darius.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chairman Hall, Board Member Smith, FCA staff, and visitors. My name is Darius Hill, Senior Policy Analyst and Assistant to the Director in the Office of Regulatory Policy. Presenting with me will be Jennifer Cohn, Assistant General Counsel in the Office of General Counsel. The issue before the board today is whether the Farm Credit Administration Board should issue a final rule amending FCA's business planning requirements to comply with Executive Order 14219. On February 19th, 2025, the Executive Order 14219, ensuring lawful governance and implementing the President's Department of Government Efficiency Deregulatory Initiative, was signed by the President. The EO directed agencies to review all regulations for consistency with law and the administration's policies. The executive order specifies 7 classes of regulations that agencies, in consultation with the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, were required to rescind or modify. After thorough review of our regulations, staff identified several provisions in Section 614, 8440 that met one of the classes of regulations in the executive order. We believe that these provisions met specifically Class 4 of the executive order, which is regulations that implicate matters of social, political, or economic significance that are not authorized by clear statutory authority. These provisions in 618-8440 met that class because they are inconsistent with Executive Order 14151, which is titled Ending Radical and Wasteful Government DEI Programs and Preferencing. This was signed on January 20th, 2025. Executive Order 14151 required the termination of all diversity, equity, and inclusion mandates throughout the federal government. The provisions of Section 618-8440 require Farm Credit System institutions to take into account diversity and inclusion in their business planning and to report to their boards on that planning. Staff recommends that FCA remove or revise 4 paragraphs in Section 618-8440 that impose diversity and inclusion requirements on system institutions. More specifically, the final rule removes the requirement that institution business plans assess diversity as a need of their board of directors. Additionally, the final rule will no longer require institutions' human capital plans to include strategies and actions to strive for diversity and inclusion within their workforce management. Also, the final rule will no longer require system institutions to have specific outreach toward diversity and inclusion in their marketing plans, strategies, and actions. Due to these changes, the final rule will also remove the requirement of institutions to report annually to its board on the progress of diversity and inclusion. With that, I will turn it over to Jennifer Cohn.
Good morning, Chairman Hall and Board Member Smith. As Darius said, I'm Jennifer Cohn, Assistant General Counsel. When the FCA added the requirements at issue to Regulation 618-8440 in 2012, it added other business planning requirements as well. Specifically, the 2012 rule added requirements for a human capital plan, a marketing plan, an assessment of board needs, and board reporting. The updated rule would retain the requirements that were added in 2012 that are not related to diversity and inclusion. Staff recommends that the FCA board adopt this rule as a final rule without public notice and the opportunity for public comment. Section 553B(b) of the Administrative Procedure Act, APA, provides that when an agency for good cause finds that public notice and comment procedures are impracticable, unnecessary, or contrary to the public interest, the agency may issue a rule without providing notice and an opportunity for public comment. In an April 9th, 2025 presidential memorandum entitled Directing the Repeal of Unlawful Regulations, and in Memorandum M-25-36 entitled Streamlining the Review of Deregulatory Actions that was issued on October 21st, 2025, President Trump and the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, directed agencies to repeal regulations identified as inconsistent with Executive Order 14219 without public notice and comment when such action is consistent with the good cause provision of the APA. Good cause exists to finalize these amendments without public notice and comment because they implement the requirements of Executive Order 14219 by removing regulatory requirements that are inconsistent with Executive Order 14151. Following notice and comment procedures would delay a repeal that is legally required and would necessitate expenditure of resources in service of retaining a regulation that cannot be lawfully enforced. Nothing that might emerge during the comment period could cure the inconsistency of the regulation's requirements with Executive Order 14151 or could overcome FCA's non-discretionary inability to retain and enforce these requirements, and therefore notice and comment are superfluous and unnecessary within the meaning of the Administrative Procedure Act. In compliance with Executive Order 14215, staff submitted this draft final rule to OMB's Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, known as OIRA, which is responsible for identifying regulatory actions subject to interagency review under Executive Order 12866. OIRA determined this final rule was not a significant regulatory action. In addition, this rule is an Executive Order 14192 deregulatory action. OIRA also determined this rule is not a major rule under the Congressional Review Act. This concludes our presentation, and Darius and I are happy to answer any questions that the board members may have.
No questions. Thank you.
No questions for me either. At this time, I will ask you to provide a recommendation to the board.
Staff recommends that the FCA board approve the following resolution. The Farm Credit Administration, FCA board, hereby approves the attached final rule for publication in the Federal Register to amend Section 618-8440 to comply with the requirements of Executive Order 14219. The FCA board authorizes staff to make any changes requested by the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs or any technical or grammatical changes that may be necessary prior to publication in the Federal Register or for compliance with the Congressional Review Act.
Thank you. After receiving the staff's recommendation, is there a motion from the board on the recommendation?
There is. I move to approve the staff's recommendation regarding the final rule, section 618.8440, business planning.
Second the motion. Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, the secretary will record the vote on the motion.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Chairman Hall?
Aye. Motion carries. Then the adjournment tab. If there's no further business, and thank you both for your presentation. If there are no further business to bring before the board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move we adjourn the meeting.
Second the motion. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, the secretary will record the vote on this motion.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Chairman Hall?
Aye. Motion carries and the meeting is adjourned.